So thank you, Professor Pacini, for representing ESF. Here, ESF is the major funding source for this meeting. And what I would like to do now, when I get my slides, is to introduce you why we came up with the idea of having this meeting in the first place. And just in order to do that, I will, there are 5 organizers for this meeting. There's Jaime, Alex, Klaus, and Gustavo. And we have been discussing on these issues. And I will give you my personal view on why we are here. This is, we have split a little bit the roles in this meeting, so I got the honor of starting it. It's going to be my personal view, and it's going to be a very quick overlook about, the state of the art and what we think we could be getting out of this meeting. One thing. Let's see if I get my slide. I'll also be giving you some organizational stuff by the end. Here. Oh, wait. Is this the one?
No, lo he copiado en el para que no te preocupes.
Quería el otro.
¿No es el intro?
El PDF.
Ah, pongo el PDF, no pasa nada.
What? Oh, here.
Okay, entonces sin clic, te quito el slide, es que no cabe en el slide.
Entonces no va con esto, dices.
Tarda un segundo más.
Bueno, da igual, entonces déjalo. Es que no sé cómo puedes ir la otra versión. No. Da igual, déjalo. Sorry, mess with versions. Okay, so we thought, this is not going to be the last version. I wonder what version this is. So we'll go through it. So anyway, here are the organizers. This is the setting. We thought that a place like this was a good setting to start thinking about noise, a place where we have harmony and peace and quietness. But let's talk about noise. Let's try to put some order into what we think about noise in the brain. And one of the questions that's been on is trying to understand how stochastic behavior emerges on the first place. And we behave stochastically very often when we're faced with uncertain conditions, uncertain sensory information. We have information we're not too sure about. We have to take a decision, and at that point, decisions, if we repeat the experiment many times, we're going to see that we are somewhat stochastic in how we decide. And this has been an issue over many years in trying to study where the source of that stochasticity comes from. So I'll be focusing a lot on this task, which is a classic task that we all know, but and I'll go into it. So, but in fact, so we thought it would be good to be more broad in our approach in this meeting. So we have invited people that also represent very different approaches to, in general, behavior and stochasticity in behavior. So we welcome those approaches too. But I'm going to focus essentially on a task on a decision-making task, and in particular, this task for some of the slides now. So monkeys, when facing a stimulus, and in this case it's motion stimulus that is ambiguous, some dots are moving in one direction, others in another direction, and the task of the monkey is to tell us what is the prevailing direction in this stimulus. Monkeys get very good at it, and but what we can see is that when this stimulus is relatively ambiguous, the monkey does make a lot of different choices that are not replicable, or they're not systematic. So that's the perfect setting to start understanding or start exploring what is the nature of what is the brain activity that is supporting this stochastic behavior. And the observation in classic studies was that neural activity, when we look at the activity of single neurons in the brain, what we see is that neural activity is typically very noisy, very stochastic in itself. And here we have classic slide in which what we see is the response of one neuron to many repetitions of exactly the same stimulus. And we see some structure, but if you look at the at the small scale, and here is a blow-up of this little patch here, what you see is that these neurons are really firing in a very stochastic way, similar to what you would expect for a Poisson process. So the fact that neurons in the brain are stochastic, behavior is stochastic, led to the hypothesis, well, maybe that this is what it is to it. And indeed, when this is a landmark study, a really influential study that went into establishing exactly this link. And they saw that indeed the variability in single neurons was predictive of variability in behavior. So the way you can look at it is by comparing. This is a pretty old version. Maybe we should change it because now this is like from harmony to noise. So so this is this landmark study that showed in a measure that's called choice probability that we're going to hear a lot about through this meeting, and that measures the relationship between neural variability and behavioral variability. What was observed is when the stimulus was on the receptive field of the neuron, there was a clear predictability in what the monkey would be choosing from the mere variability in neural responses. Okay, so this, the investigators, Shadlin and others that were working on that data came up with a model that has been very influential in how we look at this relationship. There is a pool of sensory neurons that represent the stimulus in a noisy stochastic way. These signals are pooled somewhere. They're averaged. Those signals are averaged, and then they're compared in order to make a decision. And this model made clear that in order for the variability at this level to have an impact at the behavioral level, it was important that these signals were variable, but on top that they were significantly correlated, so that when you average them together, because there are many of them, this noise didn't go away, but it stayed on, right? So variability and correlations were an important element in this model. Well, here I just made a literature search to see how these these two papers have fared in terms of citations in the last few years. And what we see is an increasing interest in these papers. These papers are being more and more cited over the years. So this, there's an increasing interest in this topic. So how neural noise is related to behavior and how we can interpret that in terms of a modeling approach. So again, in this modeling is useful because it allows us to see or to propose specific mechanisms that could be underlying both the variability and the correlation. So as I say, these are the two elements. And what that the model needs, and there are mechanistic ways in which you can get that in cortical circuits by balancing excitation and inhibition. And the idea about correlation was that, in fact, it's a sort of an unavoidable consequence of the fact of having connectivity that is with shared inputs, right? So inputs are shared. We have limited, each one of the circuits has a limited number of neurons. So as one projects to the other, or as they connect to each other, it's unavoidable that some of the inputs will be shared. And if you build that, what you see is that you can get correlations, or you get correlations immediately between neurons that share some inputs. So correlations and variability can emerge very naturally in a network like this. That was a finding. So we now so this model has both an explanation for why we see this, and it can propose specific mechanisms that help in building this sort of activity. So there's been a lot of models, computational models, specifying better all these conditions with this framework in mind. And I can't be fair to all the modeling activities that have been going on in this field. I just want to cite like the three major classes of models that have been used to understand better what are the relationships between noise and behavior. And we have drift diffusion models where decision variable is being kicked around by noise, and when it hits a boundary, a decision is taken. And this has been a very influential model, and it is still a very useful model because it's very simple, and yet it explains a lot of what goes on in these tasks. Then we have more mechanistic models that allow us to define specific dynamics and specific mechanisms that are participating in generating this decision in cortical circuits. And finally, we have models that are specifying and help us understand how computation and the coding of information occurs in cortical circuits from stochastic, irregular population codes. So all these types of models have been using noise essentially to generate behavioral variability, and noise comes in all of them as an important fact. Some explore it in more depth than others, but in general, one thing that we realized when we were working on this was that the specific source of the noise is something that hasn't been as explored as the decision dynamics. So where the noise, what are the source of noise that generates this variability in neuronal activity that then projects to the behavioral level, and which one of those noise sources may be more influential in doing that. In fact, in this, the experimental data is already hinting at experimental data is already hinting at the fact that there are different sources of noise that we should be considering and we should be caring about. So here I just had two recent reviews that specify that, well, indeed, neuronal variability and neuronal trial-to-trial variability is subject to a different source of noise, of noises like stochastic stimuli, stochastic voltage channels. All this introduces noise in the way neuron responds, but also attentional state, mental state. So I'm going to just show you 2 or 3 of these of the results that are suggesting indeed that we should be thinking more carefully about what are the sources of noise and how essentially that should be introduced into our modeling or the way we think about models. Sorry. So essentially what I'm going to be showing, because the model framework that we have in mind is that behavioral variability depends a lot on neural correlations. So I'm going to show you data that has been emphasizing the fact that neural correlations in the cortex are subject to many different modulations. For instance, here we have data from the Peterson lab in which recording intracellularly into neurons, what they see is that as the mouse goes from a quiet to whisking to quiet again, the membrane voltages of 2 neurons go from very strong correlations to decorrelation, again strong correlations. So it seems that the correlations are not a fixed result of the connectivity within the circuit, only that, but on top there is some mechanisms that are able to modulate how correlated neurons are as a function of what the mouse does. So here we see the cross-correlation functions are showing that depending on whether the mouse is quiet or is whisking, we see a modulation of that cross-correlation. And this is at a totally different scale. Now we'll look at the global scale. And also there, we now know that there is strong correlations between activity in different brain areas that are that change in the condition. This is in a resting state, so when people are not told to do anything. And what we see is that indeed there are sources of correlations, in this case internal, that go beyond this simple idea of connectivity generating the correlations. The fact that connectivity generates correlations by itself was also put into question by a theoretical study by Renard et al., where what they showed is that if you connect if you connect neurons recurrently in excitatory and inhibitory neurons recurrently, and you put it in a balanced state, strong excitation, strong inhibition, so as to get irregularity, in fact, the strong correlations that you see in the excitatory currents and the strong correlations that you see in the inhibitory currents go away when you sum all the currents to the cell, because there is anti-correlation between excitation and inhibition. So the structure in a recurrent network, when you put together lots of neurons, that shared input correlations that one saw when there was no inhibition goes away because of this strong coupling between excitation and inhibition. So what this shows is that it's not necessary. It's not that it's not there. And here we see another modeling study in which we see that indeed we do get correlations. But here it's a result of the structure in the circuit. So you see here that you have many different neurons over time, and you see that sometimes some of the neurons go up, sometimes they go down. So there is like a slow dynamics here that generates correlations at in this circuit as a result of the specific structure of the connectivity. So we have something here that needs to be clarified a bit more. So how correlations can emerge from the connectivity structure. And this is also something we're going to probably hear about in this meeting. Correlations can also be reflecting computations that go on in the circuit. So things that, and here we have a study in which through decision making and by using a quantity that measures variability when subtracting the intrinsic Poisson derived variability, what you see is that there is a dynamics of variability through the task. So that is also something that we need to think about when considering the relation between variability in variability at the neural level and behavioral variability. And also learning changes the correlations in the circuit. So this is a study by Dora Angelaki's laboratory in which what they saw is that pairwise correlations when the monkey was performing a task went down as the monkey became more and more familiar with the task. So neural correlations are also subject to modulation based on learning. So we have all these sources of different, all these different sources of modulations on neural correlations that we should probably be taking care of when we think about how neural data, neural variability relates to neural behavior. So then there is another set of sources of modulation of correlations which come from interareal interactions. So by now we know that it's very important or that the brain has lots of both feed-forward and feedback interactions, and those interactions are going to make that what we see in terms of neural variability in one area is going to greatly depend on what goes on in other areas. So for instance, here we have data from the Chinoy laboratory showing that the correlations in neurons in the premotor cortex as the monkey's getting ready for a motor action. So during motor planning, there is a reduction in those correlations. So again, this is like there is some high order process that is changing the way that neurons are correlated in this area. Again, there are other high-level mechanisms that are also changing correlations, like for instance context, and there's a study by Cohen and Newsom where the monkey had to classify to directions of motion, whether it was right or left or up or down, and for the same stimulus you can change the context, whether the discrimination was left or right or up or down, and what you see is that depending on the context, the correlations go down, change, right? So this mere context difference was conditioning the correlation values. And again, attention also has that effect. So if you attend inside of you or you ignore a stimulus, the correlations that you measure in an area are going to change. And the final study I wanted to mention here is a study that also tried to do this to relate variability at the neural level with behavioral variability, but starting from the LFP signal. And that's a relatively unexplored part of this, of this project, say, which we think maybe could be further understood. The fact that LFP can be separated in different frequency bands, and different frequency bands have been also associated with whether it's top-down or bottom-up processing. That could be some tool that can be used to further understand what the sources of the neural noise are. So for instance, this is LFP recorded in area MT, as the monkey is doing the the motion task I told you about before. And what you see is that this is the choice probability. So again, it's how LFP trial-to-trial changes in LFP relate to behavior. And what one sees is that there is a correlation that is positive for high frequencies, but it's negative for low frequencies. And that is reminiscent of the modulations that attentional selection does in the extrastriate cortex, where the power of LFPs in the extrastriate cortex when attention is on increases in the gamma band and decreases in the beta band. So this could be a signal of this choice probability in area MT reflecting some sort of top-down input. And the interesting thing here is the ability of separating within a single signal between low and high frequencies and giving different interpretations to the two parts of this signal. So yeah, we have like lots of pieces here that we think, we thought that this meeting, this forum would be a good place to try and put it together and make like a more coherent picture about what we see in terms of what experiments we have, what the models are getting us to, and how we can improve or complement or what is the model that we should have in mind in order to put together this data. So the idea when we were getting together, the five organizers, was to structure or to give you guys two main questions that we thought could be guiding how we address these issues in this meeting. So the two questions were, on the one hand, the origin of variability, just where does this variability come from? And we saw some examples where it's top-down, whether it's a stimulus, or connectivity in the circuit, and we could discuss or see different views on how neural variability emerges, what are different origins and sources of neural variability. And the next question is, okay, given these possible sources of neural variability, what is the role of each one of them in generating or in influencing the behavior of the animal? So that's the next question, linking neural variability and specifically different sources to behavior. So yeah, if the idea would be, if you can think at the time that you prepare your talk about how your idea fits into these issues, so that will help to converge by the end of the talk into by the end of the meeting into a specification of the model that goes a little bit beyond what we have right now. So of course we have to, so this is the model, say, we started with, and that's been useful and very important for all this period, in which we have essentially a view of two areas in a feed-forward architecture, and move maybe and start adding some more stuff, maybe like the top-downs between the different circuits, whether we have connectivity issues or dynamics in the intrinsic circuit that we want to account for, we think is important in this case. So the idea that we had when we put together the meeting was to give you the questions, and by the end of the meeting we'll have a discussion which will go specifically to this scheme and have people contribute their views on what would be essential to add, to expand on that original structure in order to go beyond and set the next set of questions regarding this topic. So we'll be going back to this in the last session. So let me show you the structure of discussion sessions that we have designed for this. So this is our schedule, more or less, for the rest of the meeting. And you'll see we have 3 discussion sessions. This is a discussion session I was talking to you about. This will be led by Jaime de la Rocha at the end of the meeting. And it's going to be about going back to this model and you know, putting in all the pieces in this puzzle-like way to try and obtain a conclusion of the meeting in terms of a more specific summary of what we did. In these 2 other discussion sessions that will be led by Klaus and Gustavo, the idea is to have a more of a bottom-up approach. So everybody is welcome to contribute topics for discussion on that board. So yeah, as you see through the talks, maybe we don't have enough time to discuss things that might go a bit beyond the schedule, and then or just topics that are too broad to bring up at a specific, in response to a specific talk. So then it's good, just go ahead, write up your idea there, and then we'll pick them up in the discussion session by the end of these of the 2 first days. Yeah, and then finally there is, we propose to tape some of the talks if people are comfortable about it, in order to make this the information that we're sharing here more available to a broader audience. If people, so everybody when we comes to the podium can say it's not fine, and then we're not gonna tape it. If not, we're going to ask you to sign some forms later in order to put it up in a web page and be able to share it with a broader audience. So I think that's about it. And yeah, we can start now.